Welcome to Little Notes and Big Questions. I'm Lindsay Schreiber. In this series, we are taking a look at some big societal issues through the lens of God's Word. We work to develop an apologetic, a rational, systematic defense of what we believe based on God's Word, and we work to answer the hard questions Christians are often brought on these subjects. Over the next few weeks, we are going to be in what has been the most anticipated portion of the Little Notes and Big Questions booklet, a resource that I wrote. We're going to be talking about the subject of transgenderism, therians, and other kin. Basically, for the next month, we're going to be talking about this phenomenon where people believe that they are something different on the inside than the body they have on the outside. Today's lesson is going to be mostly presenting the views of the side that is not the biblically based side. And the reason I'm doing that is because it's really important in apologetics that you understand what you're coming up against. We need to know what does that side say about themselves, because that's how we start to build our defense, because we know what they're going to say, and also we know what to say back to them. In this lesson, I hope you can catch something really important. I'm going to be pulling back the curtain on what I believe is the agenda that is pressed forward in the transgender movement, and I hope to impress upon you the importance of paying attention. What I find when we get to this subject is that a lot of Christians are dismissive. They hear things that they don't understand because, honestly, they don't make sense. They hear young people coming up with these words they've never heard before, or having these feelings that we cannot entertain in our rational brains, and Christians tend to be dismissive, or they make a mockery of it and they look the other way. And my goal in this lesson is to show you why that is a horrendous mistake for the church to make. We need to know what's going on. We can't stick our head in the sand. We don't need to be turned aside in mockery or making jokes, because our kids' lives and souls are on the line. Whenever I go into a subject to try and build an apologetic, I do my best to see what the opposing side's viewpoint is. I don't just want to hear what people like me say about that group. I want to hear what the group says about themselves. When I started to do that for tonight's lesson on transgenderism, I found a statement on one of these affirming websites that is a statement I've seen on several of these websites, but I'm going to quote it from a resource called the Trans Student Educational Resource website. It's TSER for short. I go to these places because I got to know what is their foundation. And the problem with those who are trying to press the transgender agenda is that their foundation is shaky, and they acknowledge that the foundation is shaky. The TSER website, on the page where they list definitions, says this, quote, "Terms are always changing in the LGBTQ plus community. This list will be updated as often as possible to keep up with the rapid proliferation of queer and trans language." So essentially what's happening is there is no authority who's deciding what terms are. There is not authority who says we're authorizing that these are genders, these are orientations, these are identities. Pretty much, if it proliferates or it moves very quickly in the community and people start to adopt it, then we'll add it to our list and it'll just become part of our vocabulary. And that's why they can't keep up, because it's moving so quickly. Well, because it changes so quickly and because these concepts are difficult, and part of why they're difficult, as you're about to see, is that this agenda, I'm going to keep calling it that because I'm about to prove to you that it is an agenda, they want to make everything into an identity. You can't just have emotions, it has to be an identity. You can't just have certain feelings as part of your identity. And we need to constantly be telling people what every aspect of that identity is, and that's hard to follow, even if you agree with that ideology. So in 2011, a man named Sam Killerman, he was a stand-up comic, he turned activist. In the beginning, he was focusing on addressing bigotry in the gaming world, but now he is an author, he's a TED talker, massive voice in the LGBTQIA plus space. He created an image to help people understand these concepts, but particularly it has been set up to help children understand these concepts. I'm going to use this image because it does organize these thoughts in a way that, although I do not agree with them, it does help you to understand what they're saying, because often we find ourselves speaking to people and we have no clue what they're talking about. I think this organizes it well, so it's good in that sense. The other reason I want you to see this is because this is an image that's been used in schools throughout the country. This is the genderbread person created by Sam Killerman. Now you'll notice that on the genderbread person, everything is on a continuum. These lines are continuums because there is an arrow on each side. That means there is something beyond what we know. Continuums are meant to include information that we don't have yet. It's worth noting at this point that these images have been intentionally not under normal copyright because they want these images to be widespread and easily available. We're going to start off under gender identity. Gender identity on the genderbread person is represented by the brain. It's how you, in your head, think about yourself. Quote, it's the chemistry that composes you, e.g. hormonal levels, and how you interpret what that means. On the continuum, we see women, genderqueer, and men, and all points in between and beyond. I got to tell you, and I'm sure this is because I'm almost 40 years old, and I keep getting a lot of ads about perimenopause. I couldn't help but question this when it says your identity is based on your hormonal levels, and yes, they include how you interpret them, but what does that even mean? You don't interpret hormone levels. Hormones are something that control your body. They turn things off and on in your body. There's no interpretation of it. It's science, right? I couldn't help but think about that definition, and by that definition, it makes me wonder, if you are a postmenopausal woman, are you now a man? Because I can make a pretty good argument that once women are past menopause, their body is not producing estrogen. There's a lot of things that happen in their bodies that change their bodies in a lot of ways. I could say the same thing about men. When men hit a certain age, their testosterone drops. Are they now women? No, nobody is saying that. I've never heard anybody say that you're going to reach a certain age and your gender is going to change. So that doesn't make sense. Even just at that level, it's already not making sense. The next category on the genderbread person is gender expression. This is represented by the full presentation from the outside. So the whole genderbread person, what you see on the outside, how the genderbread person is going to dress and speak and walk, and how they're going to present themselves in all other manners. Quote, it is how you demonstrate your gender based on traditional gender roles through the ways you act, dress, behave, and interact. This continuum shows us words like feminine, androgynous, masculine, and all points in between and beyond. The next category is biological sex. Well, what do you think it's represented by? On this image, meant to be used to help children. Obviously, it is denoted by primary sex characteristics, and I'm just curious, does anybody think that is an odd place to bring attention for kids? Biological sex is the objectively measurable organs, hormones, and chromosomes. XX is female, XY is male. This continuum includes the words female, intersex, which is a person who's born because of a chromosomal issue. They are born with characteristics of both female and male sex, and male, and all points in between and beyond, which is contradictory to have a continuum on something that is fixed. To have a continuum on something that their own definition just said is measurable, it is objective, there's nothing beyond. That doesn't make any sense if it is an objectively measurable thing. And also, let's just stop for 1 second. So now they're telling us that hormones are part of the decision of biological sex. But above, we were told that gender identity is decided by hormones. So let's be rational about this for just a second. If identity is based on hormones, then why do you have to give a trans person hormones to make their body align with what they identify as? Because the same hormones in their brain that they are saying to us is what gives the person their identity, what they think they are, that's the same hormone that is causing the sex characteristics in the body that they say is incongruent with the brain. It does not make any sense. That doesn't add up. Also, we'll talk about this more later, but sex is not assigned at birth. It's discovered at birth or earlier, depending on ultrasounds and testing. Next up is sexual orientation. This is represented by the heart. Quote, who you are physically, spiritually, emotionally attracted to based on their sex, gender, in relation to your own. Now, this one's very interesting to me. It's very interesting to me that this agenda is including that attraction has a spiritual aspect to it. That's interesting to me because anytime Christians want to have this conversation about transgenderism, anytime Christians want to say something about why we believe it is an affront to God, and not just an affront to God, that it is truly bad for our society, anytime we want to say that, we're basically told to stay in our lane, it's not our business. And yet here, this piece of propaganda that's being used to press this agenda for children is saying this is spiritual. It seems to me like it's not a matter of Christians trying to get into this other space. They are pressing in on our space. And so, in my opinion, for us to talk about these subjects, it's us properly bringing it back to God, who designed our bodies, who designed sexuality for a purpose. And it's not this purpose. I think we have every right to have the discussion. On this continuum, you see the words heterosexual, bisexual, homosexual, and then, of course, you'll see all points in between and beyond. I am old enough to remember when I was young that you didn't hear about a bunch of orientations. You heard that people were gay, they were straight, and then you started hearing about bisexuals more and more. You didn't hear anything else. That's obviously not the situation we're in anymore, because if there are all of these genders, potentially infinite genders, there's going to have to be potentially infinite orientations, because you're going to have to describe the attractions that you have to those people. I looked up a few different lists on orientations. Now, some say there are hundreds of orientations. That's a little bit overwhelming for me in the course of these studies. The best list I found had 44 on it, and a few of those are as follows: lesbian, gay, queer; multisexual, that's an umbrella term for bi or pansexual; omnisexual, meaning attracted to all genders but has preferences; heteroflexible, basically heterosexuals who will experiment with the same sex; ninsexual, those are people who are only attracted to non-binaries, and the list literally goes on and on. So that is the genderbread person. It feels a little overwhelming if you've never seen it before, but in 2014 it was decided that this was too limited. all those ways to identify a person and to self-identify, that was too limited, too narrow, and so TSER created the gender unicorn. Notice that the continuums have now been traded in for array, because these creators felt that the continuum was on a scale, and they didn't think that was right. I think it's pretty hilarious to think that anything that's on a continuum was too narrow, because definitionally it is infinitely broad. But the other reason that the gender unicorn looks like this is, I believe, a very sinister purpose. The purpose of the way this image is created is that you can take that little dot on that's the end point, the left side of that ray. You can take the dot and you can place it where you think you belong on the ray. The gender unicorn actually has a desktop version that you can go to, and you can grab that dot and you can move it to where you think that you belong on that ray. Some even have a cuter way of doing it. I went to the websites and actually tried it out, where they have little icons. So like there might be a little rainbow, and you can set that rainbow where you think you belong on the ray. I think that's important. Let's just look at a scenario for a second. Imagine that you're a child in your school guidance counselor's office, and they pull up this gender unicorn on a desktop, and you sit down and you get to, it's almost a game, you get to play and you decide what you are. You mark your identity there. The other change, besides the change from continuum to array, on the gender unicorn, is that they separate out orientation and they expanded identity. So let's look at gender identity first. Now we have, on the top line, female, woman, girl, and then male, man, boy, and then other genders. So you would pick on each one of these, how much of a female do you think that you are? How much of a male do you think that you are? How much of something else do you think that you are? They're listing 6 common identities, but there are others. Then we have gender expression. Now gender expression has feminine, masculine, and others. Now I want you to note that for most people, their identity is the same as their gender expression, or at least they are trying to make their expression be the same as their identity. They want to look on the outside like what they feel or think they are on the inside. A few of the more than 70, but potentially infinite list of gender expressions that I found include agender, butch, gender expansive, masculine of center. That is a term for someone who's usually a lesbian or trans, who leans more toward masculine performances and experiences of gender. Non-binary, that's somebody who does not experience gender within the gender binary. Omnigender, they experience and possess all genders. Transgender, and two-spirit, which is an umbrella term that encompasses different sexualities and genders in indigenous Native American communities. Now, this part is also interesting to me because when I point out to people just how spiritual this issue of transgenderism is, I am called mean, and I'm called all the other names that I get called on a regular basis. And we'll get into that probably next week a little bit more, why I say that, why I see a spirit at work here. But they've put it right there. Their own title of this expression is two-spirit. And basically my understanding, and my apologies if a two-spirit person is watching this and I've got this not correct, but my understanding in what I'm reading is that in the Native American community, this is a person who possesses male and female, and oftentimes that plays out in the leadership in their tribes because it will affect the roles that they do, because they'll do the roles of a man and the roles of a female, which are much more gender-based than what we normally see in our culture. But the word is right there, and even these descriptions, when it's talking about possessing all genders, I'm sorry, but that seems to spell it out pretty clearly to me that this is a spiritual conversation that we are having. The next category we're going to is sex assigned at birth. Now, I will say the gender unicorn, I think, got this part right. They take sex assigned off of the continuum. Now they say there are 3 categories. These 3 categories, you'll see the word intersex. There are people, like I said before, who are born because of chromosomal issues in the womb, that they are born with both male and female parts. The word they used to use was hermaphrodite. We don't use that word anymore. Now they say intersex. They separate that out, and again, I actually appreciate that it was separated out in the sense of there are people who are trying to say that transgender people and intersex people are the same. They're not the same. Intersex people, that's what they were born. It was a deficiency. Last night we had we had a great discussion at the end of class last night, and some people were talking about how they've seen stories of people, for instance, who say they think they should have been born blind, so then they will blind themselves to be a part of that community. That's very different than someone who had no say in it whatsoever. Whether or not that person thinks that's what they are and they feel this compulsion to become what they think they are, that's very different from someone who had no say in the matter. It's a similar concept here of intersex. I actually think it's quite revolting when people want to say, because they think something different in their mind, that they should belong to the intersex category of people who they have a life, they can have very fulfilling lives, but their life will be different than that of people who were born as either clearly chromosomally male or female. This term, sex assigned at birth, it's an important phrase. It's an important way that things have changed. We used to say born a male or born a female, or were you born a man or born a woman. And now, if you notice, this is one of the standing mantras in the community to use sex assigned at birth. What does it mean? The definition, this is in academic papers, it means male or female designation that doctors ascribe to infants based on genitalia and is marked on their birth records. Well, number one, it's a newborn, not infant. But I think there's something to this phrasing that I think is more than just they're trying to play a weird semantic game with us. My personal opinion is that they want to use that definition because they're trying to insinuate that anyone who believes in a binary when it comes to males and females, they want to say that we are obsessed with external sex traits. And if you don't think that's correct, maybe I could send you some of the videos I've watched of these interactions with someone who is an apologist or someone who's trying to plead this case. And often when the other side runs out of things to say, they will make comments about, why are you so fixated on children's genitals? We're not. But I'm about to show you who is. The phrasing here is also just false. Sex is not assigned or decided by a doctor, nor does it manifest at the time of birth. Sex, male or femaleness, of a human is determined at the moment of conception. That is because DNA, the blueprint of what your body will be, DNA will dictate the reproductive system. It dictates what will be developed when that time of development comes, and that DNA is present at the moment of conception. It's already there. That's your answer. Also, if you have seen, there's this rising claim now that gender is not decided till something like the second trimester, because generally that's when women, at least the last baby I had, I think we found out at like 20 weeks the gender of our child. They're trying to say that means it didn't have a gender until then. That's ridiculous. Your DNA tells all these things that are going to be your physical characteristics, and that was set at conception. Just because all of those things don't happen yet, it doesn't mean that it wasn't already there in you, present, that potential was not already there. Also, the differences between males and females are much more involved than just the reproductive organs. An analysis of 20,000 genes found 6,500 are expressed differently in men than in women. These differences are manifested in everything from muscle mass, fat deposits, skin, and hair. Furthermore, neurobiologists have found brain differences exhibited in the way men and women experience emotion and pain, see and hear, remember and navigate, and process faces and respond to stress hormones. Our brains are literally different. When they do brain scans, the gray matter of our brains is different. The thickness of our brains is different. The size of our brains is different. It's not that one brain is inferior to the other, but it has been proven that males and females, their brains are structurally different, and because they're structurally different, that's why men are generally better at some things than women, and women are better at some things than men. And this is an important statistic because when you get into the conversation about things like transgender athletes, because what you used to just hear pretty much, well, if a person who is assigned male at birth wants to be a female athlete, it's discriminatory to not let them do that. Well, then people started having some really important conversations about things like hormones, right? That if you have someone who's not been on any sort of hormone treatment, you have just put a biological man, a young man with testosterone pumping through his body, and you put him in a wrestling match with a woman or in a boxing ring with a woman. That's a scary thing. So then people started saying, well, let's look at if they've been on hormone therapy yet. Well, if you are a person who has ever used hormones, whether you're someone who is in that postmenopausal camp, or if you're a man who's on testosterone because your testosterone does naturally drop, or if you are a young woman who's been on a birth control pill, you probably understand hormones do some crazy things in your body when they are added. So to me, it has never been a comfort to say, well, we'll let a biological man be in the same athletic competitions with a woman as long as he is on these crazy amounts of hormones. That scares me. And if you don't think that's scary, again, go watch some videos of some of the rage that we see out of this community. And I'm not blaming those people. I'm saying they've been sold a bill of goods and told that if they take this this hormone, it's going to make them feel better because it's going to fix that dissonance in their brain. And instead, it is making everything go wonky because that's what hormones do. And again, if you've ever been on them, you understand I'm not just picking on these affirming care hormones. Hormones in general, that's what happens when you start pumping your body full of this stuff. So that argument has never made sense to me. But let's just, for funsies, let's say that you have someone who is born a male, who says he's a female. We're going to let him compete with females. Let's say that they've gotten his hormone levels where he is literally exactly hormonally like a woman, that he is mentally stable, that he's not having this rage or any of that kind of stuff. It doesn't change the fact that their muscle structure is different. It doesn't change the fact that their lung capacity is different. It doesn't change the fact that probably their hands and their feet are different. That plays out in things like, I don't know, competitive swimming. That's gonna make a massive difference if you have a girl with smaller hands and feet, and she's out here next to a guy that's got basically flippers for feet and big mitts. It's going to make a difference. I'm not being ugly, it's a fact. It's going to make a difference with what their body is capable of doing. And because of the brain structure being different, there are going to be advantages to that depending on the sport that you're playing. That's why some of us feel so strongly about the subject of trans athletes in these sports. And lastly, I just want to make a comment that all of these things I've just told you, they're the proof that sex is not assigned at birth. It is sealed at conception. It is revealed at birth or revealed at whatever testing measures you have during pregnancy. This is why sex reassignment and gender-affirming surgery is not actually possible. It is not actually possible to change one's sex. It is not actually possible to reassign sex. It is not actually possible to affirm the sex that you think you are, because you can't change chromosomes. You can change everything on the outside. It does not change your DNA. It does not change your chromosomes. It does not change the structure of your brain. It does not change the lung capacity. It doesn't change any of that. So it's not even possible. And I think that is part of the reason that statistics are continuing to show us that young people who have been told, if you get affirming care, it's going to fix your mental issues that you're having, these mental health problems that you're having. And mental health, you know, I'm an advocate for people to get mental health care, very strong advocate. I know what it is to struggle with other types of mental health. Studies are showing us long-term that the suicide rate is not better once they've had these surgeries. And that's the proof that it's not the solution. And the reason it's not the solution is because they're still not the thing they're trying to become just because they've done everything on the outside, and just because they've done the hormonal treatments, it does not change. And that's why we're now seeing a trend of detransitioning, which is a really heartbreaking thing to read, but something that's important to have some understanding about as well. You'll also notice that the gender unicorn orientation got divided into two categories. Now orientation is put as physical attraction and emotional attraction. For both of these, the options are attraction to women, men, and other genders. I want you to hear this quote. It is important to note that sexual and romantic emotional attraction can be from a variety of factors, including but not limited to gender identity, gender expression, presentation, and sex assigned at birth. There are other types of attraction related to gender, such as aesthetical or platonic. These are simply two common forms of attraction. If you watch my previous videos, I think it was the one when I talked about the claim that King David and Jonathan were in a romantic relationship. I said that I think one of the tricks of the enemy is to take young people and have their minds confuse admiration for attraction. And that a lot of times I think young people have been told that they are same-sex attracted because they look at a person and they see that person is pretty, or they see someone and they like talking to them, and so they want to be their friend, and people are telling them that means you're attracted to the same sex. Well, that's not what it is at all. I think what I'm about to read to you is the proof that that's part of an actual agenda. Aesthetic attraction that was just mentioned, here's the definition. It is a non-sexual, non-romantic admiration for another person's physical appearance, much like admiring a beautiful piece of art. It manifests as a desire to look at and appreciate someone's looks without any intention of romantic or sexual involvement. So definitionally, it's not romantic, it's not sexual. It is looking at someone else saying, oh, they're pretty, or they're handsome. It's literally just acknowledging what you can see with your eyes. Then we have platonic attraction. The word attraction is important. It is a desire for a close, non-romantic, non-sexual bond with a specific person. We used to call this friendship. We used to call it having a best friend if you saw someone and you said, I want to be closer to this person. But what this agenda is doing is calling that attraction. Now, in the strictest of terms, is it attraction, like you want to be close to that person? And understand, they give all kinds of different types of attraction, like an intellectual attraction, which means that you want to learn from a person, but they have to put the word attraction on it because you're drawn to that person. But we all know what's going on because the gender unicorn has included this on a page that's talking all about sex and gender. So we know what they're trying to say here, and what they're trying to do is to say that anytime you have positive feelings towards a person, that must be some form of attraction. Sure, they're going to say it's not sexual, but it doesn't matter because it's still included on that paper when a child is filling the paper out. I also think this is very funny because this comes from people who I always hear say, don't label me. And yet here we are labeling every single thing, and not just labeling it, but saying it is germane to my identity. I can't just have a friend. I have to label it as some form of an attraction that I have. I have to label every emotion and every thought has to come back to who I am on this sexual or romantic level. Orientation is really important in this conversation, and now we're getting into the part of why we've got to pay attention instead of dismissing things we think are silly. We talk a lot about identities. You've probably heard that, where people just, I don't know if you ever see these people that their introduction is, they give their name and they'll say, I'm he, them, I'm mask, I am a butch presenting, blah, 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 blah. We hear a lot about that, but the expansion of the categories of attraction is important because of what it did to drag people under the LGBTQIA plus grouping. We're going to talk for a few minutes about those acronyms because while we were over here saying that's just silly, I don't even know. How many times have you heard somebody, or maybe you've said that? I hear people say it all the time. Oh, you can't even keep up with all the letters. I don't even know what they mean. And they go on about their day. I'm about to show you why you should have been paying attention to what they were putting in those letters, because the letters actually matter a great deal. The letters are very important in what I think is a scheme and an agenda towards children. I want to bring your attention here in the U.S. Now, again, the acronyms itself, they are constantly changing. Here in the U.S. where I live, LGBTQIA plus is the most common, the most prominent, the most widely accepted and understood acronym that we see used. But I want to show you, if you go to the Canadian government's website, this is their official acronym for this community. 2S LGBTQIA+. I'm going to give you a second and see if you can figure out what all of that means. Oh, Canada. This acronym is Two-Spirit, which I just told you was the Native American grouping, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, questioning, intersex, pansexual, asexual, and allies. I want to explain what these mean. Some in my church didn't know exactly what all these meant, so let's go through them. I already told you what the Two-Spirit was. Two-Spirit is used in the Native American community for someone who has both male and female spirits on the inside of them. Lesbians are women who are attracted to other women. Gays are men who are attracted to other men. Bisexual is someone who is attracted to both genders. A transgender person is someone who feels like their gender identity is not matching the sex, quote, assigned at birth. Then you have queer. Now, the thing about queer is that queer is an umbrella term for anything. Anybody who is not a heterosexual is under the queer umbrella. So I don't even think it's fair to even have that in this list. And then you have questioning. Questioning is someone who is just uncertain of their gender. Then you have intersex. I already explained that. Someone who is born with sex characteristics of both male and female. Pansexual is attracted to everything. So they can be attracted to men, women, to transgender people, to non-binary people, truly anything. The word pan just means any or all. Asexual. This is the important one. Asexual is someone who does not have sexual attraction to anybody. Please hear what I'm saying. This is so important. Asexual is someone who does not exhibit or feel any sort of sexual attraction to male, female, binary, non-binary, transgender. They don't feel it for anybody. Pay attention to that word. And then allies, well, allies are people who are supporting the LGBTQIA, or in Canada, the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. And then plus is just others. We had a discussion last night of some theories of what is going to fall into the other that I think is actually probably correct. I'm not going to get into it here, but they're just kind of saying anything else that is not a heterosexual person who does not support us. It's a brilliant scheme. It was so smart what they were doing. When we look at the Canadian acronym, a lot of those letters just have no place there. Again, queer is an umbrella term, so it shouldn't even count. Asexual is not actually, it's not an orientation, it's a lack of an orientation, so it doesn't count. And allies, being an ally is not an orientation at all. An ally is a person who is supporting another person, but that doesn't mean that they have any sort of sexual orientation in that, unless what they're doing is putting that under the category of they are attracted, like we just talked about, they have a platonic attraction to people in the community, and therefore they're going to put them into the same grouping. Now, we can talk about the Canadians if we want, we can make fun of the Canadians if we want, but here's what's important. In the US, where we're still using the LGBTQIA+, that means here we do still believe that we have lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgenders, queer, intersex, which, again, intersex is not an orientation or an identity. It is just truly, it is a chromosomal issue. Okay, it is a disorder. It is not an identity. And we still have plus, which is others. But that first A, we've got that one too. Asexual. I've said it like 10 times because it's the most important thing I'm going to say to you. Asexual, being included in this grouping, is the most important thing you need to get out of this entire video. Here's the reason. Number one, when they put everybody into these categories, think about this. If you were going into a war on a small level, a street fight, and you were looking at it as if every day you were out here fighting for your life, you would want a bunch of people on your team, right? So by including all of this, what they're doing is putting pretty much everybody but heterosexuals, and especially heterosexuals who do not affirm their lives, they're all put on the same side of a battle, which is going to make it much more likely, they thought, to have support of more people. Now, it's backfiring. It's a fascinating study to see how many people in the LGB part of that acronym are rebelling against the rest of it because they feel like it's taken away legitimacy and because they're seeing the same agenda that I'm about to talk about. But the brilliancy of including asexual in that category comes down to this. If you go to this website, to the TSER website, to find the gender unicorn, you will find this unicorn in 15 languages. It is intentionally without copyright protections because they want it to be widely distributed. And you will find this coloring page. They have a coloring page because it is intended to be used with children. It is intended to be distributed to children. It is intended to be used as a tool with children to help them identify all of these different categories to better understand themselves. I'm very curious. At what age would you find it appropriate to help somebody identify the kind of person they are sexually attracted to? When I asked that question last night, I had someone who said basically not till you're 21, that's an adult decision. It shouldn't be a child's decision. I had some who have children who said, well, I mean, let's just be realistic. By the time a kid's, 11, 12, 10, somewhere in there, by the time they're that age, they're already understanding things about sex. I had someone else who said, I think they said maybe 5 or 6, just because they knew the world that these kids are now immersed in. When you research the gender unicorn, the suggestion is to start using this image at age 3. To ask 3-year-olds about their sexual attraction. In light of the clear push for this ideology to be taught to our kids, why does it matter so much that they're pushing to put asexual, a term meaning someone who does not experience sexual attraction towards individuals of any gender, under the LGBT category? Because kids usually don't develop sexual attraction type feelings until close to puberty or later. So I want you to think this through. This coloring page is clearly not for pubescent children. I like to color, but I can tell you, being the mother of an almost middle schooler, these kids think they are adults. They're too cool for that. These coloring pages are designed for young children. These are designed to be handed out before they have felt any sort of romantic attraction. So think about it. Let's go back to that counselor's office where they have this fun little game on the computer, or they have this coloring page. And this counselor asked this first grader if they're attracted to boys or girls. Well, number one, they're probably still going to say, ooh, that boys have cooties, because they're still at that age, and thank God they should be at that mindset. If they say neither, they're deemed asexual. Or if they start talking about their friendship with someone of the same sex, because you're supposed to have friends, they'll be put under that category of their attractions to the same sex. They'll be labeled as same-sex attracted as a first grader. And that's what they'll be told. And that's what will be stamped on their brain. Or if they are like most kids and they say, oh, they don't think about anybody like that. Before they're even out of elementary school, before they even hit puberty, they are told, you're asexual, which means welcome to the club. Because A is in the LGBTQIA+. Welcome to the community. We have parades. It's not an agenda. It's not planned. It's not the work of the enemy. Miss me. I want to point out another disturbing issue on this paper. And I don't know, maybe you caught it. There's a specific danger under that sexual attraction section. Again, I find it disturbing to be talking to 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10-year-old kids about their sexual attractions. I find that very disturbing and very odd. But that aside, I want us to pay attention to the actual wording here. If you notice at the top of this page, back when we were talking about what you think you are in your brain, we had a choice that included boy or girl, meaning the creator of this paper knew there's a difference between adults and children, right? Because when you put a first grader in front of this and they say, how much of a woman do you feel like? Well, they shouldn't feel like a woman because they're not a woman, right? But that's why you can say, okay, well, how much of a girl? You can change the phrasing because girl is on there. How much of a girl do you feel like you are? How much of a boy do you feel like you are? The Creator knew there was a difference between adults of that sex and children of that sex. But what do you notice when we move down to this attraction section? There is no boy or girl choice. Now, on the attraction scale, the choices do not include minor words. So now, you're required to be asking them, are you attracted to women or are you attracted to men? We're asking 3-year-olds, are you attracted to women or to men? See, it's not far-fetched when people on this side of the issue have very strong feelings about what's being forced on kids and what we're being set up for. It is not a stretch that we start using words like grooming. And I want to be very, very, very specific in this. I am not accusing that everyone who's a part of that acronym, by no stretch am I saying that they all have attraction towards minors. I'm not saying that, and I won't say that. I don't believe that. I'm not saying that all of them are groomers, and that's actually a big reason why so many people on the front end of that acronym have begun to rebel, because they recognize they are being lumped with people that some of those voices are the loudest voices to say, yes, the rest of these have true sexual perversions that are not going to be fixed. I'm telling you, it's a very interesting little battle within that group. But I can't help but have my heart drop a little bit when I see this cartoon unicorn coloring page and understand that they are having kids specifically say if they are attracted to adult men or to adult women. And they're saying that if you're not attracted to anybody, which should be the middle of the road, well, not the middle of the road, it should be the correct answer for a child, then they're labeling them as asexual. And if they're asexual, they're saying you're a part of this group too. Why? Because then they think they will be more likely to be allies, to be defenders of this group, when the rest of us are saying something is really, really, really wrong here. I want to address one more thing before I get to our conclusion, the biblical stance. A very common objection today is that gender is a social construct. A social construct is an idea that's created and accepted by society. The objection says it's a social construct not determined by body parts. Well, activists actually ruin their argument when they say that gender is a social construct, because they want to insist that the terms man or woman are totally relative, decided by the individual wearing those labels. You may have seen videos like on the street interviews where someone is asked, what's a woman? And they almost always reply, whatever the person calling themselves a woman says it means. What's a woman? An adult human who identifies as a woman. Well, what does that mean? Whatever they want it to mean. That's a ridiculous circular answer. That is not an answer at all. It doesn't mean anything. Well, a social construct is definitionally an idea that has been created and accepted by the people in a society. So when they say gender is a social construct, and that means I can make gender whatever I want, that doesn't work, because by definition, a social construct cannot be decided individually. Definitionally, that can't be. You can't just make it up. So their only choice is to say, because gender is a social construct, we will have to either throw away gender, period. And the problem is that if you throw away gender, then all these people who are cosplaying and dressing up as the other gender, they can't do that either, because that's no longer valid. Or we have to go back to identifying as our birth sex, which is something in a lot of arguments. You may start to see that as well. That's kind of popping up now, where people are saying that they will own it. They will admit that sex is biological, and that's when they say this about gender on the side. But again, if gender is a social construct, then it means you're going to have to abide by what socially has been accepted and has been accepted for a very, very long time. In conclusion, I know this is so not me. I usually give so many Bible verses, there's not room for anything else. But I really felt strongly how to do this today. So I'm going to conclude with our biblical stance. The Bible plainly states God created only two sexes, male and female. This means sex is binary, not on a spectrum. Every human who has ever existed or ever will exist was created by God in the image of God and as such has value. To affirm claims that God created a body in error is to deny the infallibility of the Creator. This is the easy answer. This is the simple answer. I'm going to get next week to the deeper, more thorough answer, and it revolves around the heresy of Gnosticism. So I hope you come back next week. Next week is going to be a much deeper conversation. It's going to have a lot of theology. It's going to have a lot of Bible verses in it. But this is the surface level answer that, just to be honest, is not going to work with a lot of people that you talk to. But it is the correct answer, which is backed up in Genesis 5:2. God created them male and female. He blessed them and called them mankind in the day they were created. Those are the only two options. This is where people want to toss in intersex. Intersex was not an intention. Intersex is a disorder. Disorders are an effect of the fall. It was not God's original intention. God did not make a third category of people. God did not make an other category of people. This is God's design. This is what mankind is meant to be. And Deuteronomy 22:5. Oh yes, how dare I use a scripture in Deuteronomy? Well, how dare I? Because it's in the Bible. Deuteronomy 22:5. A woman shall not wear anything that pertains to a man, nor shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all who do are an abomination to the Lord your God. The idea particularly of intentionally deceiving somebody in what you wear, it's going against the nature of God. It's going against how God planned us. God did design us differently. We are biologically different. And as I've already explained, it also means that we are better equipped for some tasks than for others. With that, we are made not unequal, not one better than the other, but we are made differently. For us to go against that is to go against God's design. Also, to deceive people, deception is always wrong, and to deceive people into thinking that you are the wrong gender, it can easily lead into other acts of sexual immorality that we've already covered for several weeks now. I appreciate that you've joined me for this week of Little Notes and Big Questions. I hope you come back next week. We're probably going to take a couple weeks on transgenderism before we move into therians, other kin. I really appreciated last night. Our youth were here with us and really added some great context to this conversation. As I said, we're going to go into the Gnostic heresy next. Just to give you a little preview on that, the Gnostics believed that the material world was evil, so everything physical, including our bodies, are evil. We are not a soul-body unity, in their opinion. We are just a soul. Our soul is the only thing that matters. So your soul, if it doesn't match the body, then the body has to be dealt with because the body is wrong. So we're going to talk about the Gnostic heresy and why that plays into this. We're going to talk about some other scriptures. We're going to answer at one point an objection I have heard, a couple of objections I have heard, one being that eunuchs in the Bible were transgender, which, spoiler, no they weren't. And two, we're going to talk about something that I have seen. I've seen clergy written position papers on some of these affirming sites that say because God changed people's names in the Bible, it is perfectly normal to change your name or your body to align with your identity. So we're going to address that as well. We're going to hit some very specific objections. So at least one, maybe 2 more weeks on this subject. Then we're moving into therians, which is also under the category of the Gnostic heresy. And I'll give you a preview there, because if you watch this long, you deserve it. Where we're going to go on that subject of people who say they are something other than the human being God created. I addressed this briefly last night because it was brought up by one of our young people. We are the pinnacle of God's creation. For me to say that you are anything less than a human being is demeaning, and I'm not going to demean you. I'm going to honor you as the image bearer of God. I'm going to honor you as someone created in His image. I'm not going to call you something less than that. And for me to call you anything else is to say you're less than the rational being that God designed you to be. So again, I appreciate you joining me. I hope to see you again next week.